May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free of economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we have a guest, Michael Phillips, who's an old friend of mine and of Zen Center's. He goes back into the late 60s in his relationship with Richard Baker. And anyway, we talk about all that. I'm going to read you a Wikipedia entry on Michael. Michael Phillips, born 1938, is a published author of 11 books and a founder of the Briar Patch Network. I'd add the Briar Patch Network of small businesses. As a banker in 1967, he organized MasterCard. I would add to that the first interbank card. And I know he did that from talking to him before. We don't get into any of that in this banking stuff. He was vice president of Wells Fargo when he did that, and he went on to become vice president of Bank of America. He didn't like it much. And then he became director of the Glide Foundation or something like that for Cecil Williams at Glide Memorial Church and other things. He's his entry on Wikipedia says Michael Phillips Consultant. Phillips was president of the Point Foundation in 1973. Point was created with money from the Whole Earth catalog. Writing for the Co-Evolution Quarterly in 1976, and that's just more Whole Earth catalog, same office, same people. There was Co-Evolution Quarterly, and later there was Whole Earth Review, which I did some work for. Anyway, writing for it in 1976, he was the first person to suggest random selection of legislators and co-authored the first book on the subject in 1985. And his very, very close friend, Bob Gnezda, may he rest in peace, who died last year, was into the random selection of legislators, too. And, I remember them talking about that, long ago. Phillips has been an expert witness in more than a dozen public utility cases on behalf of major American minority organizations. From 1988 to 1998, he produced and hosted the national public radio program Social Thought. He is also a pro-business blogger. Yeah, he writes a lot about commerce. And he was an important business advisor to Zen Center, but he's a really fun guy. He was a good friend. Well, he's still a good friend. I just haven't seen him much. But we have fun talking, and we talk about a lot of stuff. I'd say in terms of oral history, one of the most important things we talk about is how Green's Restaurant came about. And we get into that, I don't know, about 50 minutes into it. I have interviewed all the principal people, I think, involved with creating greens. And I did so because the Zen Center website had something on it about greens that didn't even mention Richard Baker. And Greece was like Richard Baker's conceptual art piece. Anyway, but, you know, whoever was writing, they had to write something to put up. And there'll be more later about it. I have to get into the notes on that, and I plan to write something on it. But, okay, so listen, after the pause to meditate, we'll give Michael a call, all right? So when you hear the bell, hit pause, if you wish, and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause, and we'll all be here refreshed from our meditation. We'll hit the bell, and we'll give Michael Phillips a call.
This is Michael.
Good day, Michael. How are you?
David, wonderful, wonderful. Right on the minute. Our clocks must be synchronized.
Yeah, indeed.
And I'm impressed that this 8,000 or 9,000 mile distance has no effect on the sound on the on the phone.
Yeah, well, I'm calling you with Skype. You know, Skype to phone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It cost me $30 a year. We could talk for I think about 29. We could talk for a whole year now. For that.
Yeah, that's good. That's great, David. Well, you are the first modern man, you know. You're living wherever you feel like on the planet.
Yeah. Well, goodness. You're.
Well, can you hear me clearly?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I blush.
Well, you are the first modern man, and you're going to be a model for everybody else.
Oh, goodness. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do it by blind faith and living on the edge of cliffs.
I know, and going to the beach and lying in the sun and in a perfect tropical zone. It's hard to beat that.
I don't lie in the sun.
And massages.
I don't lie in the sun. I do go to the beach, but I swim, and then I go sit in the shade. I get enough sun, man.
Shallow. It's pretty shallow where you are, isn't it? The beach is shallow out for 100 yards.
Yeah, but it can be over your head. It just depends on where the tide is. It's great because it's inside the reef, so it's really good for swimming. Can
you see across the water to any islands or Malaysia?
Yeah. No, not Malaysia. We can see there's three islands that are actually part of Bali. The Bali is a province. Limbongan, Penida, and a little tiny one in between called Chinigan. And that's our favorite vacation spot. It's a 30-minute boat ride. I don't like to go too far. Mainly we walk places. And it's really...
I know that I know the area, but on the Malaysian side, my father had an island there, and when I visited him, we swam, and it was wonderful. The temperature of everything was the same. The water, the air, the rain, everything was, all temperatures were the same. And sunset and sunrise every day of the year was from the same place.
Your father, I remember your father quite well. He lived in Singapore, right?
Well, he went to Singapore every 2 weeks because they never would allow an American to have a Malaysian visa. But he lives on an island about 60 miles northeast of Singapore. And then he'd drive in every weekend. As he says, he's probably the only farmer in the world who didn't have a visa or needed a visa for his farm. Because his farm was only had vegetables, a little vegetable garden.
Wasn't he a rabbi or something?
He started out as a rabbi. He was always, of course, he's always a rabbi, but he didn't. Went into business late in his life, and traveled around the world, and retired to this little island right near the town of Mersing.
Oh, a
couple of miles from Mersing.
Wow, I must look it up on the map. You know, one thing I remember about your father is his car, which the
Lagonda.
Lagonda. Yeah, and you know, I did research on it, and we kept it in the garage at 340 Page Street, and I tried to help you sell it. I don't remember what happened.
Well, I had a girlfriend at the time who was a lawyer for the big auction house, and she got it into the auction in Los Angeles, and it sold.
Oh, it was classic. I mean, it was old, classic,
gorgeous,
and rare.
It was gorgeous and beautiful. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was a '62 Lagonda, and we must have gotten it somewhere in the mid '70s or late '70s.
So, how did we meet? I mean, we met. I think we met after, maybe it was after I came back from being head monk and director of Tatsara for a couple of years, and came back in the fall of '75.
That sounds right.
And
that sounds right. And I'm one of the few people that appreciated your singing and guitar playing. So I got as much of it as I could.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of that. Yeah, you were a good listener. I played you a lot of songs. Some people were good. You know, I got to where I could tell who would put up with it and who wouldn't. I think we might have known each other beforehand. No, I think it goes back
I'm sure.
further.
I went to Tatsara starting in '71.
Okay, well, that's where I met you. I know you from Tatsara in '71.
Every year.
I was assistant director that year.
We went every year for the no race.
The no race, yeah. Did you go with Carol then to the no race?
I would have gone with every girlfriend by then.
I know. I really I couldn't keep up, but Carol Ray was one of them for years.
Oh yeah.
Carol
Ray. Well, once I brought a threesome down to Tatsara, Carol Ray and another woman. And boy, that was one hell of a year.
Yeah, well,
she was a gorgeous beauty. Oh my God.
Yeah, I would assume that. Yeah. So, But so we knew each other then, but we connected more when I was back living in the city. Maybe we connected some because I was also in the city in 72 as the work leader in the building, and then 73, yeah, I knew you back then. 73, I was at Green Gulch work leader, and also Richard's Jisha, our assistant.
Well, at Tatsara, I would have gone to join you when you were smoking. So, so you didn't. So you had somebody to talk to. So we would have been able to go sit out with the garbage cans.
Yeah. Tatsara was always good for keeping the smoking down. I would just smoke like a few cigarettes in a day there when I smoked.
Yeah. Well, whenever you did, you let me know, and I would meet you down there.
Ah, that's funny.
And bum a cigarette.
That's funny. That's funny.
I know.
Wow.
Well, I like the cigarette crowd. I liked whoever was down there.
Yeah, boy, it got really small.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. In the later on years, I got to so few. I would go down to Tatsara and have one a day with the cigarette people, but I stopped doing that in 2004. I didn't. I haven't had a cigarette since then.
Yeah, by then you were getting old, and prices were way up.
Yeah, well, that's what. Yeah, I turned 60 6 months later, and I decided it was time to change my habits. So I gave everything up. Alcohol, pot, tobacco, and coffee.
Wow.
Yeah. I still
and sex with young girls too.
Let's see. Oh yeah, no. I didn't do any philandering. Good Lord, since 87. And once Elin and I were a thing, that's it. There hadn't been any since then. Well, I had a little dating between Elin and Katrinka. I had a little dating.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. Well, those were the good old days.
Yep.
Yeah. And are you still in the same house?
The same house has been. Sonny has greatly redecorated it and drastically improved it, so it now looks much more like a sophisticated little country home.
Oh, and it's like on Twin Peaks side.
Yeah, on the side of Twin Peaks, next
overlooking
to Hill.
Yeah, overlooking the San Francisco, that side. Actually, you're sort of in the center of San Francisco there.
Yeah, exactly. We're probably 5 blocks from the technical center of San Francisco.
But nobody thinks of San Francisco as what's behind you. I'm not nobody, but...
Oh, no. I mean, we're totally surrounded by trees. It looks like Marin.
Yeah. And does the little road going into it, is it paved?
Well, it was a dirt road up until about a year and a half ago. I had to pave it. Finally paved it after 45 or 50 years.
Wow.
Because it was a dirt road that was leading to the underground river that went into our downstairs apartment. So I had to pave it. I paved it, but it was unpaved for 48 years or something like that. Anyway, Sonny has done a lot to remodel the house. Every year she does something new to it.
Well,
puts up a wall or stairs or something, or a floor. She's always improving the house.
ah, ah. Well, I hope someday to get back there. We'll see. I have no plans to leave here, but we'll see.
Oh, well, Stephen just phoned.
What?
Yeah. Somebody just came to the front door. He phoned first, and I couldn't answer his phone.
Oh, hey, you know what I did?
No.
Before I called you, I went out, and I can put a padlock on the front gate from the inside.
Oh. Well, people don't drop in.
So it looks like nobody's here, because we got a big bell there. There's always delivery people and people coming to collect for stuff, hitting the bell. And I called our housekeeper, who comes about 10, told her what was, she has her own set of keys. And I told her about a delivery that was coming and this and that. And so, so nobody will disturb us here.
Well, and I take it you're recording.
Yeah, I am. When did you first, your introduction to Zen Center was in meeting Richard Baker, who at that time was called, and ever since was called Baker Roshi. I tend not to use honorifics myself anymore, except out of politeness and if other people expect it,
Well, when did I meet Baker? I know when.
Yeah.
It was before he went to Japan.
Oh, well, that's in the 60s. Oh, you met him. He went to Japan in 68 in the fall.
Yeah. When did he get back?
He got back in 71 in like October, and the Suzuki died in December 4th. So he got back. I don't think it was September. It could have been September. I think it was October, but I'm not sure. And then back.
I knew him in the late before 68 because he was on the board of the Portola Institute.
Yeah.
Put him on the board of Portola Institute. And so we used to drive down together. And that's when I first got to know him.
Oh.
We always had a wonderful time driving down there and talking all the way there and all the way back.
Oh, Portola Institute. Wonderful. I used to stay with Dick Raymond in Portland, and Dick and Carol in Portland.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, God. How great. He was so great. And, man, he was always on the verge of working with this thing for that energy thing. What was it? It's not fusion. Fusion.
Oh, right. Cold fusion.
Cold fusion, man. Every time I'd see him, we've almost got it, And it's going to be the big thing.
That. I do remember that Dick Raymond. No, I miss Dick. He was a wonderful friend, and I knew Dick from 1964.
Oh, well, gee, he promoted a lot of fascinating stuff like the Whole Earth catalog.
Yeah. Oh, and Briar Patch. The name of the Briar Patch came from Dick Raymond and his ideas.
Okay, tell us about Briar Patch.
Well, Dick Raymond's idea came from somewhere in the East Coast mountains, where one of the writers for the first Whole Earth catalog lived, and the Briar Patch idea was simply that everybody would live simply. And one day, when I was business manager of Glide and getting very tired of people coming to my office hippies coming to my office for advice about business, so I rented an office in Pier 40 down on the waterfront, a gigantic pier, and this is right up near the front. The people who rented the office below me was an art colony called the Ant Farm.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, I rented an office, and I told my secretary that I was going there every Wednesday just to get away from everything. But if anybody wanted business advice, send them there on Wednesdays. Well, the first Wednesday, there must have been 5 people. The next Wednesday, 10 people. Following Wednesday, 20 people. They're all sitting around in my office. It was a big office, and I could go up on the roof of the pier and enjoy the sight of the bay and the sound, everything. By the third Wednesday, there were so many people there. I just looked around. They're all wanting to start a business and all wanting advice. I just looked around and said, my God, they can give each other advice. They don't need me. I can help, but they don't need me. And so I called on 4 friends, Dick Raymond, a lawyer whom you remember. He's a lawyer for Zen Center.
Oh, you mean Dick Wertheimer?
No.
Bob Ganesta, your closest friend.
Very handsome guy. Nonprofit specialist.
Oh, Tom Silk.
Tom Silk, right. So it was Dick Raymond, Tom Silk, Elliot Bucktrucker, and a friend of mine at the time, Andy Alpine. He later became known as Bahauddin.
Yeah, I remember him.
And Andy was working for me at the time at Glide, doing survey research. And so I invited them all to come, and I said, look, if we put up, I don't remember what it was, $100 each or $200 each, we can hire Andy to be a coordinator of this group of people. It keeps coming. And then I'm not going to have to give advice. I'll give advice specifically on Wednesdays, but Andy will be able to put them each in touch with each other. And Dick Raymond suggested the name of the Briar Patch Network, which is what it was. And that was in 1974, May or June. And the number of people kept growing. By the end of 1974, there were 600 businesses in the Briar Patch Network. And the requirement to be a member was that you had to believe in simple living, and your reason for being in business was to help the community. And most importantly, you had to have open books, which was something Stuart Brand was promoting at the time.
Mm.
So that's what all the businesses were. And as I said, by the end of the first year, we had 600 member businesses. That was the Briar Patch. And
wow.
Andy was a coordinator. And Andy was a coordinator for at least 3 or 4 years. And then we had coordinators. And the Briar Patch, as I ran it that way, with weekly consulting on Wednesdays, we went out to the businesses from there on. I ran it until about 84, and then from then on, Claude Whitmire ran it.
Oh, yeah.
And still is running it.
No, really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. He's got regular Zoom meetings.
Wow.
And it's a very different. We had all kinds and sizes of businesses. Now it tends to be very small, 1-2 person businesses.
Mm-hmm. I remember Rainbow
Oh, yeah,
Grocery.
Rainbow Grocery. Yep, they moved twice after, they joined when they were part of a religious group, and then they moved twice after that. And they're still alive and very healthy, packed all the time.
Yeah. And you had a particular like for them, as I remember.
At the time, I definitely, they were wonderful. It was a commune of about 40 people, and there were some really extraordinary people in the group that I've stayed in touch with, a few of them.
Yeah. So I remember, when I came back from being director, Richard wanted me to stay as director, but I'd been at Tatsara so much. I'd been there 7 years, and I had to leave. I just had to leave. And he said, and he'd say in the meetings, and David will continue being director. And I said, no, I won't. And so finally he gave up. And he said, all right, well, you run the grocery store in this city we're starting. And so I came in.
Oh, that's right. I remember the grocery store. Greens.
Green
Grocer.
Oh, great.
Right,
Yeah,
Green
I mean, the Green Gulch Greengrocer. We
right.
And we sold produce from Green Gulch Farm. That was 74. We'd only gotten Green Gulch Farm in 72, but we had some great produce there. It was really good, and boy, was it in demand. And you were very helpful. You came by and advised me, and
Oh yeah, I'd love to come by.
visited, quite a bit. And you brought Paul Hawken.
Yeah, Paul Hawken joined the Prior Pass Consulting Group for many months. He was very helpful, and he knew grocery stores from his experience in Boston.
Yeah, with Erewhon. He helped found
Mm-hmm.
Erewhon for Mishwa Kushi, the
Right,
macrobiotic
right.
thing.
Well, he was macro all of his life. If he's still alive, he's still macro.
Oh yeah. He was really into food purity and all that. But he was very helpful as an advisor because I was under a lot of pressure to bring in more money, and it was only open for a few months. And he looked at it, he said, you're doing the exact right thing. He said, and you're not going to start, the store won't start making money until it's been open for 6 months, something like that. And It was exactly what happened. And he didn't have a relationship with Baker yet. And I thought, this guy's got to meet Baker, They will get along. But it was hard. Richard tended to take advice from his friends that were in the more professional world, like you. So I had to get other people to suggest. I had told Richard about Paul, but I had to get other people, Yvonne and you and other people, saying, get them together. And then, a love affair was born.
A disastrous one became very important at Zen Center.
First, it was with Paul and Richard as a intellectual.
Oh, right. That went on for a long time. Actually,
yeah.
Before Paul's beautiful blonde wife got involved.
Yeah. That was only a weekend. But wow, that was the face that sank 1,000 ships, huh?
It sure was.
But it wasn't her who sank it. It was.
Oh, I know.
Listen, I was talking to Richard once years later. And I was telling him how I.
Oh, Anne. Her name was Anna.
Oh yeah, I know.
Anna Hawken. I couldn't remember her name.
Yeah. I was talking to him, and we were at Mayumi's house in Muir Beach, and I told him how I'd been an interim director of Green Gulch, and that I had done a very good job until I fell in love with Elin, and then I became useless after that. He said, "Oh yes, women, we will destroy ourselves for women." I thought that was so great.
Boy, it was true. God, it was true.
Well, so
I did too. I had a terrible situation like that once.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Well, no, the public doesn't know about it, but Stuart Brand and I were extremely close friends. We used to play handball together regularly. We were wonderful friends. And once on a camping trip, he went with his girlfriend. I guess I'll remember her name. He he went camping up in the Sierra with his girlfriend, and they must have gotten into an argument. And she said something, she thought of the nastiest thing she could say, and she said, "Well, I've been having sex with Michael Phillips."
Uh-oh.
And he was infuriated by that. But his girlfriend had been having sex with Michael Phillips. So he came back, and in fury, I wasn't home. He left a note on my door, stuck there with a knife, and said, "We'll never discuss this again. It's finished." That was it. We remained cordial business associates, but we were never friends again.
Oh.
And the woman did it deliberately. She really just did it deliberately. She had lots of boyfriends, and many of them were public. So I wasn't really aware of what the risk I was taking.
Yeah.
But,
well,
oh God.
Later you developed a set of rules.
It was my fault. Right. I should never have had sex with anybody who was having sex with a friend.
Yeah.
No matter what no matter what I knew about it, I would never have done it.
Yeah.
Oh, her name was.
Oh, I knew.
Yeah. So Baker and I have one thing in common.
Yeah.
Except he got much worse treatment because of it than I did.
Well,
I just lost a very good friend. That was it. He definitely started expecting puritanical behavior among the students.
Uh-huh.
And I spent a lot of time talking to him about it. I said, "Look, if you're going to do it, you should at least start sending some of your students to the National Sex Forum so they can understand what sexuality is about. Make it open. Let them talk about it openly. Don't suppress it."
Good
and
for
he
you.
just dawdled for a year. I got places for him, places for students, and he just dawdled. He never pursued it at all. And it would have allowed at least an open discussion of sexuality, and it would have not generated such a puritanical environment. But he didn't. That's why I make that a fourth important issue. Probably part of many countries, but it's part of America that anybody that becomes too strong, we chop them down.
Well,
we chop them down whether they're guilty or innocent.
Well, no.
Anybody who's strong.
No. I just
No?
Just the ones that have brought their own downfall through arrogance and hypocrisy and at least in the Buddhist world, that's what I've seen. It's been what I think is a healthy balancing. Well,
the Tibetans were able to hold on to their power even after they got infected people with HIV.
Well, yeah, they've been
They
different.
had a different kind of power, and nobody was after them because they weren't a very large group.
Yeah. Well, the Tibetans tend to be more guru worshippers than the Zen people or the Theravadan people. The Theravadins have been pretty untouched. Not totally, but mainly. But
well, there is just Americans do it. They do it to Jim Jones. They did it to the group that used to be out near Point Reyes.
You mean Synanon?
Synanon, yeah, totally.
Marshall.
Just went after Synanon. The press went after Synanon for no reason whatsoever and totally wiped it out. But same thing with a group in San Diego and Jim Jones. Everybody that began to be an apparent leader gets attacked. That's American history. I mean, that's always happens. It's part of our organic social fabric.
That's an interesting way to look
And
at
I
it.
always advise people. I told Dick never to get the BMW. That made him a visible symbol. I wouldn't let Cecil Williams drive a goddamn Cadillac. I made him drive I don't know, a Buick or whatever the equivalent was at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yvonne tried to talk Dick out of getting that. She showed how there was a BMW that cost half as much, that was just as safe, and would fulfill all his needs, and he wouldn't do it.
Oh, I know. I know. That's hubris. That's hubris, and that's also failure to understand what brings down leaders in America. It's just.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. He kept going. Hey, you remember my psychic friend Fred Kimball? You saw him.
Yeah, I remember Fred.
I asked him once. You know, I could just ask him about people. He'd give me a little hit on him. I'd said, "So, hey, tell me about Richard." And he paused for a second. He said, "Oh, wow. Here's a guy that can be knocked down 3 times and still get back up."
Well, it certainly was true.
that's all he said. Yeah, yeah. He's still going strong. And he's done a lot of great things. My life, Michael Katz and I talked about how our lives have been, that we owe so much to him and to and Michael to the guy who started Linda's Farm, William Irwin Thompson. And they both had flaws and all, but God, that without Richard, there's a lot of people I can take out of the picture, and I could see myself still having gone through basically the story I did, but not Richard. Richard and Suzuki were 2 necessary pieces of that picture.
Well, I would have to say the same thing. Baker had an enormous influence on me in many, many, countless ways. Especially my relationship with Japan. He was the one who stimulated my permanent interest in Japan. I give him credit, and I visited him in Japan. I spent time with him in Japan.
Oh, really? Really?
Not when he was there as a monk, but later, when he would go. He had kept a house in Kyoto, and spent a lot of time with him in all over the Kansai area. Over the next 10 years, during the 70s.
What?
That's how we met.
Mayumi?
No, the Brush.
Oh, Kaz Tanahashi.
Kaz, yeah, Kaz. I introduced him to Kaz. Kaz's girlfriend at the time was a friend of mine, and not in Kyoto, but in one of the big towns north of Kyoto. I met her, and she introduced me to Kaz, and then I introduced Kaz to Baker.
And I think you introduced me to Kaz as soon as I came back from Tatsara in 75.
Oh, sure.
And that was great. What a character he is.
I love Kaz, yeah.
Yeah, really.
He was wonderful.
Yeah, combining scholarship, just top-level scholarship, with artistry and creativity and
and being a fun guy too. He was always fun to be around. Oh, very open-minded, just fun, curious, interested in everything.
Yeah, I remember, that period when I was insane about Elin, and really insane because she was in Taiwan and said, well, that's the end of us. That was before we got married. Kaz and Carol Ray did a workshop at Green Gulch on creativity, and they asked me to contribute something to the workshop. And believe it or not, I came up with something, and both of them, but Carol even more so, I'd say, were really far out. I came up with something. They said, "Never mind," and that was semen art.
Well, I'm surprised Carol Ray reacted to that adversely. She used to do menstrual blood art.
Yeah, it was probably cause. It was probably cause. Anyway,
yeah, right.
it
Not
was.
Carol Ray.
I was insane. And people knew it. They let me just live in that room for 6 months and cry and write songs. I wrote a zillion songs. Yeah, all right. Well, they were very good to me.
I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah.
Very well.
I'd like to hear about your relationship with Japan. I mean, what you mentioned that this is the first year in 50 years or something. You're in 51. You haven't gone to Japan?
Yeah, the first year I went, which was 70 or 71, I was going around the world at the time. And the first stop was Japan. And I didn't have much of an idea of what culture was, even though I spent plenty of time in Europe and spent a year in Israel, but I didn't know what culture was. And I was asking Dick Baker for a lot of advice about what to do in Japan. I was only going to be there, say 7 or 8 days. And he told me enough things, especially about Japanese sexuality, that I decided, well, at least I'll look. To me, when I got there, they were just small Americans working a little harder and a little more methodically than Americans do, but they're just small Americans. and I finished my trip around the world, and I came back and I thought about it. And I said, no, these people are different, because I had several experiences in Kyoto. They were shocking, and Dick had prepared me for it. I wouldn't have seen it without Dick. The first thing Dick told me is that their sexuality starts at infancy, childbirth, and they keep it away from Westerners, but to them it's very open. And I was riding on a bus, and right across from me was a mother and a little girl. And the little girl, who couldn't have been more than 3 years old, was masturbating. And the mother was ignoring it until she saw that I was watching. And and Japanese can't say no either. So all of a sudden, she couldn't say no, so she tried to distract the girl by pointing out the window. Look, see, there's your favorite butterfly. Look, there's your favorite bird. And the girl finally stopped masturbating and looked out the window. That was my first clue. These are not Americans.
Uh-huh.
And then Dick told me about a sort of a strip tease. There's no teasing at all. Stripping. And they just take off their clothes, put them in a little basket, and let men around the side look at, with flashlights, look at what they want to look at. And Dick had told me about that. And I went to one of these strip shows in the middle of the day, and I was shocked. I mean, I knew plenty about sex and everything related to it. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And lastly, I was staying at the place that everybody else stays, all the tourists stay, the Three Sisters or something.
I stayed there. I've stayed there.
Yeah, everybody.
Ted Kennedy stayed there.
Right. And the woman who ran the place, in those days, I thought she was probably in her 40s, late 40s, early 50s. I don't know what her age was. I was 22, 24, something. I was in my late 20s, maybe 30. And I noticed every time I came home around 4 o'clock in the afternoon to just clean up and before I went out in the evening, she had a teenage boy who came and gave her a massage. And I looked and watched, and it was not just a massage. It was this teenage boy and this 50-year-old woman having a wonderful time. And I say, oh, my God, that would never happen in America. And that's what opened my eyes. All of a sudden I said, these are not little Americans. There's something else going on here. This is a different culture. And as I traveled around the world, Korea and Hong Kong and Thailand, India, Kathmandu, and I even went to Afghanistan, Kabul. Met my father in Kabul. I spent some time in Kabul with my father.
Wow.
and stepmother. Anyway, I finally came back, and I just all of a sudden I realized what culture was. Culture exists, and there are significant differences. And so I said, well, I'm going to study this. So from that year on, from 1971 on, I went every year to Japan. I only missed 1 year when Sonny had mastectomy in the mid-'90s. But every other year I went, and never spent less than a month, often spent several months. 1 year I spent about 3 or 4 months. I had a client who gave me an apartment. And I have, to this day, I'm still studying what Japanese culture is. I'm trying to see how much of it is possible for me to understand. And every year I find something totally new, stunningly new. Never stop learning what the hell Japan is about. And I watch people who don't understand what culture is about make terrible mistakes. That's part of what I learned is when I see their mistakes, I'm shocked. And it helps me understand what's going on. For instance,
yes,
there is a social hierarchy in Japan, from the emperor, number one, down to lowly leather working Korean in Osaka,
right,
who's 1,023,001 or something. There's an absolute hierarchy, and anybody can find their place. They all know their exact place. You're 73,270,044. You know where you are, and you only even know somebody who's only 1,000 steps below you. And I was going to, the story that was most stunning to me was one time I gave a talk on international marketing at Waseda University, and the marketing professor invited me, and then he invited about 20 other professors to come and meet me for a drink in a restaurant afterwards nearby. And I noticed at the restaurant they didn't know each other, but they were passing out their cards to each other and talking to each other. And when it came time, the drinks were about 30 minutes to 45 minutes long. When it came time to sit down at the table, now in Japan, you sit in a hierarchical relationship to the most important person. So I was given the head table seat in the middle. And everyone just slowly talked to each other, and they lined themselves up all around the table in hierarchical order. Just from a minute or 2 minutes worth of talking to each other, they knew, based on language, movement, occupation, posture, they knew exactly where they were in the social hierarchy. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned, utterly stunned. On the other hand, you can't tell what the hierarchy is. One of my very closest friends, definitely won't mention her name, I knew that she was from the samurai class, and until I realized at one point we drove by a high school, and she said, "Oh yeah, I went to that high school." I said, "So did the next emperor. He went to that high school." She said, "Yeah, I know." And on another trip, we went around the back of the high school through a small alley, a small street, and she said, "Oh, this is where the horses are." I said, "Horses? Come on, this is the middle of Tokyo." she said, yeah, well, we have a big horse paddock over here. And the hereditary elite, the emperor's family, and everybody around him all know how to ride horses, and we all know how to shoot arrows from horse on being on the horseback. And I was, I knew her rank. Probably in the top several hundred people in social rank, and still don't know how they communicate. For instance, one time, one of my friends was in Tokyo, and I said, well, why don't we, I want to take, he liked tofu and he loved Japanese kaiseki dinners. I said, why don't we go to the oldest tofu restaurant in Japan, or in Tokyo, Edo at that point. And he said, sure. So we went there to look and get the phone number and figure out how we could get in. There's a hell of a long line. So I said, no way, how are we going to get in? And he really wanted to go at that point with his family, 2 boys and his wife, 6 of us total. And I said, well, I'm going to ask my friend if she can phone and make a reservation. Well, she phoned and made a reservation, told us when to be there, like 3 days from whenever she phoned. And we were escorted to the 3rd floor, which was 100% empty, a tatami room, probably 20 by 40 feet, 20 feet wide by 40 feet long. We were given a table, and our own several kimono-clad beauties served us a 12-course tofu meal, elegant. But we were all alone. I said, God, there's something wrong with this restaurant. It was so busy, had a line out in front when we first came here. And we walked downstairs, and the 2nd floor was packed to the walls. And the 1st floor, there was still a line. There were people sitting all inside waiting to get in, and a big line outside. And I was just stunned. I said, she got us a reservation? I don't know what she said. It probably was her tone of voice or her voice or something in her language. That we were now being treated as national royalty. And that happened a few other times. I asked her to get a room for us. She got us the lowest price, highest room in a tall building. I mean, we were paying $2,000 a month for an elegant apartment on the 23rd floor, and they treated us like royalty. I realized I've got to be careful when I ask this woman to do something, because we're always going to be given, imperial class treatment. And I've always been careful since then. But, she was in that class. Something in her ability, something in her language over a phone communicates to them without her. She's very humble. She would never say anything. Communicates to them that they're talking to a member of the imperial household.
Wow.
So those are many, many. I have unlimited stories along those lines about the social ranking, how it works, how precise it is, how precise the entire country is in the technology. One time we were staying in the house, we trade houses with friend Brian. And Brian, who's not very mechanical and is certainly not very good at repairing anything, the upstairs toilet, it was a Japanese toilet, and the toilet spray, he, rather than fix it, because he lost the valve, he just put a pair of pliers on it, vice grips on it, so you could turn the vice grips, which turn the water on to the spray part, and then turn it off so it wouldn't drip. And I just said, this is a waste of time. What the hell? I'm going to turn it on. I'm just going to make sure I'll put something in the toilet so the water doesn't make any noise, so we don't hear the dripping. And I did that. And the next day, a guy in a uniform comes to the front door and knocks on the door. And he says, there's something wrong with your water here. You've got some water running at night, all night. I said, oh, my God. Your water system can tell you that in one day? Oh, yeah, sure. Here in San Francisco, we had water running a full blast for weeks I was about to sell it because it was, I thought it was spring water coming out, but I found out, checked the water and found it was a leak in a main. They never detected that. Weeks later, full blast. We never occurred to us to monitor water that closely to make sure there were no leaks. It's a totally different world. Anyhow, so I spent the next 50 years studying the culture of Japan, the cultural elements that make up Japan. And it all goes back to Dick.
When I went to Japan, you gave me a couple of contacts in Tokyo that were very, very helpful. Shin Yoshifuku at CNF Communications.
Oh, yeah. Shin.
And I stayed there. That's where I stayed, in a lovely 2-story wooden home in Suginamiku. And it was a translation house, and they were wonderful people. Him and Shin and Etsuko, and he died He died about 10 years ago. I stayed in touch with him. I saw them when I went back to Japan. I saw them when they came to San Francisco, and also, wasn't it you I met Umigami-san through?
Oh yes.
Yeah, he was at.
Oh yeah, I have vast contacts. I have more friends in Tokyo than I do in San Francisco.
Wow.
And every year we go. Well, it takes a month to see them all. One meal a day. That's 30 friends.
Oh wow. Do you know what happened to Umigami or?
No idea.
He was well, I could go on about him, but that's enough of that. Hey, I'd like to talk about your relationship with Zen Center, and especially I want to hear the story of Greens getting going, but you became like a principal business and management advisor to Zen Center. I was aware of that, my memory now just goes back, to when I was living in the city and I was only there half a year or something, or 7 months before Dick and I had a "you're fired, I quit" conversation, and at the same time that Diane, my wife Diane, was clearly dissatisfied with our relationship, I suggested to her I take Kelly and go off. And then Dick wanted me back. He took it back. I said, no, this is good. I just must tell you this one thing. So Diane, who'd been, who clearly was tired of me, but she hadn't thought of that. And she was sort of up. But then, so we agreed, and I took Kelly, who was 2.5, and so she was saying goodbye to me. I took the car. She could stay at Zen Center and became the buyer. She wanted to work. She didn't want to be just a full-time mother. And she was saying, "Where are you going to go?" I, had all this stuff back with Kelly. And I said, I thought I'd go down south and see so-and-so. She said, you don't. That's not who you like. Go to Valinas and see Liz. That's who you like. You love Liz. And I thought, that's a good idea. And I went there, and that was 76. And I was with Liz until about the same point, the spring of 1985. But anyway, I always loved that. That was so great.
That's a great story.
And she and I, Diane, she and I were so very, very close and in contact a lot. So I really want to hear the story about Greens, but can you start off with just, your relationship with Zen Center and Dick and his salon, and all that.
Oh my God. How am I gonna? I don't remember all of that. As I said, Dick was on the board in the late '60s before he went to Japan. Was on the board of Portola, so we talked and talked endlessly.
Yeah.
When he came back, he put me on for the next 10, 12 years, I guess. He put me on every single board that Zen Center had as an advisor for everything.
Right.
I was on every board, the finance committee. There were a lot of wonderful people on there, and I had a great time with them. Enjoyed them immensely.
Yeah.
And then when he started having his salons at the newly furnished, beautiful building on Page.
Oh, you mean the Hodge House?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
After he finished the gorgeous Hodge House, started having salons. And he invited me to every salon. So I had a magnificent time and meeting wonderful people. He also often took us out to me and whatever my girlfriend du jour was to dinner. And I met a lot of wonderful people that way. And I knew everything that was going on in Zen Center and had lots of contacts there. Had a few girlfriends, not very many, but a few. And went to all of every event that Zen Center had. Now, what's relevant is that the history of greens is that in the early 60s, I was in the Army Reserve. I was in active duty, and then on the reserves from about 61 to 67, 66, somewhere in that range. And the reserves were over in the Presidio, and whenever we didn't have a large space, so whenever we needed everybody to sit down and watch a movie or hear a lecture, we went over to Fort Mason, Building A, which had a big room where we could have movies and lectures. So I knew Fort Mason very well. I knew all the buildings and all around it. Later, sometime, whenever Kohoutek happened, I don't remember when Kohoutek was, maybe in the mid-'70s. Kohoutek was going to be the great coming of the Messiah. It was to be a comet that we could see brightly every day. Well, it didn't pan out that way, but we had a big celebration down at what was then, later became Bill Graham Hall, but it had some more benign name before it was named after Bill Graham. And there were about 130 tables set up for every hippie business in San Francisco. Every hippie organization in San Francisco was there.
Where is this?
This is near the Civic Center.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In the auditorium right opposite Civic Center. And it may have been just called Civic Center Auditorium. Anyhow, some woman who was 10 years older than, I was already 10 years older than hippies, and she was 10 years older than me. And she just went around and got everybody at every table to sign some statement. And it was a statement about the coming future and the Aquarian Revolution and Kohoutek and everything that was going to be new and different. Anyway, they all signed on, so she had their names and addresses. And later, about, I'd say 2 years later, I think 76, 77, the Fort Mason, the military was going to turn over, or did turn over, Fort Mason to the GGN, to Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And they had no idea what to do with it. The thing was, the guy who was in charge of it, and you knew him, I forget his name, Mike something, he got in a terrible bind because the most powerful institutions in San Francisco and the Bay Area all wanted it. Like the University of California, the city itself, the Park and Recreation Department, every powerful institution wanted Fort Mason, and he couldn't figure out how to fight off these warring, gigantic, politically powerful institutions. And each one of them got some member of Congress to support them in their demands. And he found a solution by saying, well, this has to represent a broad cross-section of the city and the nonprofits. And Ann Howell had her little list. And by that time, it was only about 113 or 114 organizations. But they were all nonprofits, and she got them all to sign again, saying that they would be happy to rent space in the Presidio. And the guy who was making the decisions looked at this and said, this is my way out. I'm going to give it to this nobody nonsense group, a bunch of hippies. And I can argue that they represent the city and they represent nonprofits. And he did. He gave it to Ann Howell as head of this imaginary 113 organizations. And so Ann and her boyfriend moved into Building B on the second floor, and they were just living there. All these buildings were empty with leftover furniture and leftover chairs and tables. And she and her boyfriend, Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
I still know Ralph because he's been living with Van Hohenstein ever since then. But he was living with Ann Howell.
I used to go over and see them because he played guitar and he liked to play lead guitar with songs I wrote.
Yeah, that's the Ralph.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, unusual guy.
Yes, indeed.
So they were living together, and I was advising Ann as to how to get the place set up and how to get money and how to organize it. And she put together a board of directors that would allow it to look official and get money. And she slowly, and I told her, for 55 cents a square foot, you can rent this whole place out to everybody. And she did. Very quickly, we filled the whole place up. And the next thing is I said, Ann, we need two things. We need a restaurant where everybody can get to know everybody and regularly see each other, and we need a copy center. And we got both, but she said, well, how are we going to get a restaurant here? It's going to be nonprofit. I said, well, let me go talk to the chairman of your board, who was Rudy Hurwitz at the time. And Rudy and I were good friends, and Rudy had been on one of the finance boards of Zen Center, and he was a donor to Zen Center. He was an old, very good friend of mine. He was actually a good friend of my family. His daughter and my father were very close friends. And and Rudy and I told Rudy at breakfast, which we had breakfast at the little bakery, Buttercup Bakery, which was the first hippie, the predecessor to all the other hippie restaurants in Berkeley, long before Chez Panisse. And it served a hippie breakfast with homemade bread and everything came from local farms. It was the original hippie bakery. And it was also a member of the Briar Patch, so I knew all the people. Anyway, they sat down at Rudy lived about 2 blocks from there. Rudy sat down. I said, I remember the conversation. I said, Rudy, and I told him that there was no future to proceed to the Fort Mason unless they got a restaurant. And he said it had to be nonprofit. I said, I'll get somebody. And I went to Dick Baker and said, Dick, we need a restaurant at Fort Mason. It has to be nonprofit. I want to show you the space. It was the motor pool. And we went to the motor pool, and I looked at it. I showed him the size of it, and I don't know what you're going to do about this floor here. It was all covered with oil, deeply embedded in the concrete. But this is a space where we can get you a restaurant. And Dick immediately went to work, and it was very quickly. Problem of the oil floor was quickly solved when he showed it to Sim Vanderin, and Sim Van said, well, the floor shouldn't be here anyway. floor should be raised up where the tables and people could look out the window. So that solved the whole problem of the oily floors. Then he just went headlong into making it work, and he did a magnificent job. The other thing was I had many clients, restaurant clients over the years. Before then, I had actually started consulting when I was a banker. And one of my biggest clients was a little restaurant that was in railroad cars, and it became a national success, big chain of 100 restaurants. And the first one opened in San Francisco, and I told them, look, when you open, the people have things called soft openings, forget it. You must fill your restaurant up to the walls. I don't care what you do. I don't care how many friends you have, but even if you don't have any friends, go to a bar and invite everybody there to come to your restaurant when you open. If you're full from the day you open and you keep it full for the first month, you'll be a success. And so I told Dick that. And I told him that when it opened, it had to be packed to the walls. And I had given that advice to countless restaurants, and they always listened, and they always did very well. And I always told them free drinks. Just get them drunk, because your employees don't know how things work yet. But if everybody's drunk and happy, they won't notice how good or bad the service is. And Dick had already gotten approval to serve wine, so it was packed from the day. And with 10,000 people on the Zen Center list, it was packed for the first month, and it was packed from then on. As he slowly added it was only a few days when it opened, and it slowly added new days until it covered most of the week, and most meals. So Dick had a magnificent success on his hands. You may or may not know it, but Dick tried the same thing in was it Pueblo?
In Santa Fe. Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, okay.
Oh, of course I know it.
New Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, he tried the same thing, and I came and looked at it and said, Dick, you don't have a chance here. Not a chance. This is the capital. All the legislators are going to be steak eaters, and it doesn't matter how good your food is, they want steak and they want scotch. And Dick was open for a little over 2 months with a very fancy chef, an enormous amount of money. And part of the money, one of the people who lost money was one of my friends from Tokyo, who is a big publisher, Tex, who's also a friend of Dick's. That's about it. So Dick's success in San Francisco Greens had a lot to do with he knew that clientele, and he understood how to make a really wonderful restaurant. And he was the one who realized it should not in any way look or feel hippie. He was very careful about that and did a wonderful job on that. Years later, Michael Winger and I had to get rid of some of the paintings that were bothering everybody because they were much too bold and abstract.
Oh, you mean Edward Avedisian's?
Yeah, Edward's paintings were just too bold, and they were getting complaints from the staff. But that was 5 or 6 years later. But Dick was right in putting those very bold, non-hippie paintings up on the wall. He understood that an expensive vegetarian restaurant had to be chic, not hippie. He did a wonderful job, and then sending the first chef over to study at Chez Panisse for
Deborah Madison.
Deborah Madison. He got Deborah started on her life. She did a wonderful job. Really did a great job of cooking and figuring out what to serve. It was a wonderful success. And yes, it came from my having been in the Army and knowing Fort Mason and being a consultant to Ann Howell.
And every time from the day he started being interested in that with you, he got hold of me and asked me if I'd be the maitre d'. And then...
Well, you were an important part. Your job as maitre d' was unique as everything else you did, including the greengrocer. Being a maitre d' that could deal with all of the horrible things a maitre d' has to deal with, and making everybody happy was stunning. I mean, most restaurants have a level of arrogance that was not appropriate for Greens. And you made everybody happy, made everyone feel comfortable. It was wonderful.
Oh, really? Well, my goodness.
Oh, my God. Very important. Very, very important. Dick knew that, too.
Yeah. But, after 2 years, I told Ed Sattison, who was president of Zen Center, I said, Ed, I've been doing this 2 years, and that's enough. And he said, well, come back to me in 6 months, and we'll let you know if we're ready for you to leave. So, but I hadn't been a company man with Zen Center, what was that, 1980, since 76. I'd been a free agent. I'd been involved. Mm-hmm. So I just went to, Karen was no longer the manager. Renee was, and Ed was sort of, he was head of the floor. And I talked to Renee and Ed, and they were happy to get rid of me because I was such a dominant person there,
Yeah, of course.
And I said, hey, Ed says, and so-and-so. I said, well, we can take care of it. Don't worry. And the greatest thing happened. I was living in Bolinas and playing music and doing stuff, and I did it until I ran out of money. And then my friend Gregory, who's still a very close friend, lives in Tucson. He and I put together a little route. He helped me for free, thank God. A very talented guy. Put together a little roofing company to fix tar and gravel roofs, and I called it Roofer Madness. And I put little flyers around saying, if you've got a leak in your roof, tar and gravel, I can fix it. And I'd go to somebody's door who answered it in Marin, and I remember a woman answering the door and looking at me, and there I'm got my work clothes on I used an acrylic with acrylic on my arms and my shirt, and she looks at me and goes, but you're the maitre d' at Greens.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was great.
That's great. That is great.
So, how did Greens?
I ended up on the board of Greens too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. So, how has Greens evolved in your opinion?
Well, Greens has been a stunning success. I only know it up to about 3 years ago when I was on the board and got the financials as a board member. Mm-hmm. But I have no idea what's happened since then because they had a fire. They've got the lockdown. I don't know if they're survived or not.
Oh, they're going to survive.
I have no idea. But they, I always advise them. There are new restaurants in the Presidio, and I've always told them the more restaurants, the better. People come to a cluster of restaurants.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in their mind. The cluster is what works in their mind. And but the reason I got on the board of Greens is in itself an interesting story. I was called in to help do long-range planning first for Zen Center and then Greens. And I said, look, there's no such thing as long-range planning. It's bullshit. You start asking for long-range planning when you've got a problem. So what's the problem? And he said, no, we need long-range planning. Well, I went to a couple of the long-range planning meetings. I said, this is total bullshit. There's nothing else you can do. You don't have the skills. Dick is gone. You can't start any new businesses. And you've already failed at about 5 businesses without Dick around. And I said, but I know you wouldn't call me in for a long-range planning unless there's a problem somewhere. And about a week later, the problem came up. The manager at Greens, the general manager, couldn't come back because he had some back problem. And he was living in Marin. He couldn't commute that distance anymore. I said, oh, that's not the reason. There's something else going on here. And I hired your friend, the private detective.
Tink Thompson.
Who lived out in, lived out in Point Reyes or wherever the hell you were living at the time.
Bolinas.
Yeah, Bolinas. And I hired him. I said, I want you to check on this guy. Well, you know, private detectives actually don't do any work at all. They just have files on everybody. And they just pull out the file and charge you $5,000 to let you buy the file. Well, I looked at the file, and sure enough, the manager of Greens had a con going. He was, the Greens by then was getting the very finest wines in California directly. They wanted their wines sold at Greens. He had a wine list of 180 labels. And I said, first of all, that's a horrible mistake. That's insane. You should have expensive wines, but you can do that with 80 or 90 labels. And he said, no, we need this 180, whatever it is. And I said, well, you're partly right, but you're definitely wrong. And the private detective, your friend, found out what he was doing. And he was getting cases of wine from all of the fancy vineyards and taking half of it or more than half of it and selling it on eBay out of Portland, Oregon, shipping them out of Portland, Oregon, so there wouldn't be any connection. And I said, okay, to the rest of the board, I said, this is what's going on. I said, look, my detective will go into his garage, get his laptop or his computer, and we can prove it. We can just print out sales. He's running it out of his garage. And they said, no. I said, come on. We have to show that he's been stealing from the restaurant, or else he's going to get an enormous settlement for quitting and claiming that we pressured him to quitting. And they wouldn't allocate any more money. They wouldn't do any more investigation. It all came out of my pocket, the $5,000. So at that point, and then they weren't going to buy into it. So I wasn't going to be responsible for it. He turned around and sued for $60,000. And his wife was a lawyer, and they were smart enough to go to every law firm in the Bay Area that handled employment law and present their case, knowing that they had them all tied up. Once some law firm had listened to their case, they could no longer listen to anybody else's case on the same issue. So we were absolutely screwed. And my good friend who ran a Greek restaurant on 9th Street, Stoyanov. Did you know him?
Mm-mm.
He's a wonderful guy. Anyway, Stoyanov insisted that we pay the $60,000 that he demanded and not fight it and not pursue the fact that he had stolen all of this wine. And the whole board was against me. I think I held out for 3 months and finally just said, I can't hold out any longer. You guys want to lose $60,000. You don't want to fight and you want to let some criminal get away with it. That's fine. But at that point, they had brought me on the board to deal with the nightmare of a manager who was stealing and who was going to sue them. So from that point on, I was on the board. Michael Wenger was the chairman. I mean, Michael and I were good friends.
So what happened? What happened?
They paid the schmuck $60,000 and settled the employment suit. That's what happened. But that's what got me on the board, was to deal with that nightmare. It was my job to actually confront him. They made me the front man. I had to confront him. I had to get his keys back. Yeah, I had to tell him we were going to settle, and we were not. At first, I told him we weren't going to settle. We were going to sue him, turn him into the cops. But ultimately, I'm the one who had to tell him we were settling. So it was a nightmare. But Greens has always run beautifully. And the chef from that point, from Annie, there was one chef after Annie, and then the next chef was Anne again. And she remained there for 18, 20 years.
Oh, Annie Somerville.
Annie, yeah.
She was after Deborah.
But there was some person in between, and it was only for 2 or 3 months.
Harper.
Yes, right. And then Annie Somerville came in. And Annie, oh God, I couldn't have got Annie to do anything at all. I said, look, food has changed in the 90s. Restaurants have changed. And I said, they're making things more interesting. They've got the way the plate is designed is a more important thing. And they're using architecture to lay the food out in a way that makes it interesting on the plate. The plating becomes important. And he just said, no, it's the quality of the food. I said, Annie, please let me take you out to a good restaurant. And I finally, after I'm talking about a year of persistence to try and get Annie to go out to any good restaurant in San Francisco, I finally got her to go out to a good French restaurant, and they had a rotten soup that night. And I called the manager out, and I introduced him to Annie, and I said, is there anything you can do to get us a better version of this soup? And he was French, and he was arrogant. That's perfect. Hell, it wasn't perfect, and it didn't show Annie anything. So that was the end of that. I didn't succeed at that point in getting Annie to change the way she was doing things. Finally, after we went through the whole rigmarole with the general manager, we got a new general manager interim. I hired him. He was no good. He was a very good general manager, but he couldn't do any finances. He couldn't do the books. He couldn't present any material. So we had to get rid of him. I had to get rid of him. The next person I hired was a really good guy, and he knew the business very well. He was just universally good. And the first thing he did is he said to Annie, I have to take you out to some good restaurants and show you what they're doing these days. And for him, she did it. And so he took her to good restaurants, and she made a magnificent jump in the level and quality of greens in about the mid-90s, maybe late 90s. Enormous improvement. She understood her plating. She understood architecture, and she had fun with it by then. So, and by then, Zen Center even allowed mixed drinks. So that was a big improvement too.
Really?
The rest,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was necessary because mixed drinks were coming on the scene and were important to young people. And we had to make sure we didn't become a restaurant for old people and a restaurant for lesbians. Although, last I looked, the luncheon was still about half lesbian. It didn't matter. It's a loyal crowd. And then we went through a lot of people selling. Oh yeah. Then we built an extra room for private parties.
Yeah.
And hired the first 2 salespeople weren't that good. The third one was magnificent. And from that point on, at least until I left 3 years ago, from that point on, we had all of the elite businesses in San Francisco coming to Greens for their parties. And then they brought their elite college degrees and alumni associations. So it became a very, very elite organization, the private dining room. There was one other interesting story to go with it, and that was a guy. You used to call it the fly room. There was a small room with a table for six tops.
Yeah.
It was
the
a fly room, and we called it the fly room because it always had flies in there, and it could only put fly paper in there at night. Couldn't have fly paper there during the day.
Right.
Anyhow, that room became a favorite of a vegetarian lunatic by the name of Steve Jobs. Even on his wedding night, he went there for his wedding dinner.
Oh.
So, and I try. There are many innovations in restaurants and marketing I tried to get Greens to look at, but Annie was never going to change anything. I wanted to name that the Steve Jobs Room. I even paid to have a bronze plaque made saying Steve Jobs Room, and never got put up.
Oh, very interesting.
I had a lot of other innovations in how to promote greens, and I was always opposed to advertising of any sort for anything, but I had other promotions I wanted to develop, but no, I couldn't get any to go along with it. And by the time 3 years came along, everybody on the board was happy to see me go. Michael Winger went first, and then once I didn't have Winger to protect me, everybody was happy to see me go. I mean, they never expressed it openly, but it was real.
Well, you remember the first years of Greens, it was slave labor. It was all of us Zen students.
Well, that went on for many years.
Yeah, and then gradually, then there was just Ulysses and Annie and Bruce McAllister and Jay.
Yeah, Jay was there. I remember Jay very well, and of course Ulysses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they were important. They were important fixtures because the place was just beautifully run. I mean, it was really well run. It was kept up to date. Many times people wanted to make changes. We got endless proposals for redesign, and I always said, look, it has to look refreshed and new and sparkling, but it can't change. And people came to slowly to understand that. I agreed. I told him I agreed to take the massive sculpture of the what was his name?
J.B. Blunt.
JB's statue. I said, oh, look, you've got to keep the front part, the table parts people are supposed to eat on. You can replace that. Nobody will notice that it's been replaced. And then J.B. Blunt's daughter got involved and organized the community to make sure we couldn't get rid of any part of the thing. But, that was consistent with my view that you have to look refreshed at all times. You need new carpets, you need new chairs, but you have to keep the place exactly the same in other ways. So, and for a long time, they had Mayumi's paintings, which were wonderful, but they were a little too sensual. So somebody replaced them with something else.
Oh.
Yeah. They got replaced with some sweet, scenic watercolors.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Anyhow, that's the history of Green. What happened 3 years ago, I have no idea. After that point, I begged them to send me the financial statements. Oh, I remember the big controversy. It's when the city was raising the wages to $15 an hour, and the waiters were already getting $60,000 to $70,000 a year in tips. And I just said, we really have to start planning for this. It's going to eat into our net profit. And everybody just said, oh, they deserve it, hard workers and blah, 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 blah. Nobody was willing to even look forward at all. So I think they were lucky to get a fire and get all the insurance money from the fire. But I don't know what's happening now. mean, I don't see how they can weather the. Well, yeah, they had a percentage. The deal, their lease was a percentage, so they're not going to be hurt by the absence of a business.
The lease was like 5% to the national park.
Exactly, 5%, and then there was another 2.5% that got added on later. Rudy Hurwicz negotiated the 5%. Rudy was a great negotiator.
Did you ever meet Bill Whalen, who was head of GGNRA?
Yes.
I think when we got it, and then he was head of national parks under Carter.
Yep, I remember Bill.
Yeah, he was. He liked coming there, and he took Diane and Kelly and me after Diane and I had broken up. On a private tour of Alcatraz. That was great.
Wow, that is great. Yeah.
Yeah, locked us in a cell.
No, I knew Alcatraz very well. One of my friends was a guard after it was abandoned. I used to go over and stay in the dormitory buildings for the staff. But we would just go from room to room and pick up old furniture and bring it to the room they were living in and build a fire inside the apartment, the concrete apartment. And I used to fly over and drop in the Weekend Chronicle.
Oh, really?
There's a big open space. Yeah. Well, I owed him a favor for letting us stay there a few times. And so I would drop the Chronicle from my little airplane.
Now, you were on the board of Zen Center for quite a long time, and you were on the Everyday Board. Is that what it was called? Outside Financial Advisory Board?
Yeah, Outside Financial Advisors that became the Everyday Board, yes.
And
I don't remember any important decisions or any important problems. The only problem I remember, and I advised them. I advised them to do something they didn't do. When we had the coffee shop down in Coal Valley, the manager at the time, who later became a friend of mine and opened his own restaurant, but at the time he was just a hot MBA from some fancy school somewhere on the East Coast.
What was it? What in Coal Valley?
It was a coffee shop.
Are you talking about the bakery, the Tatsara Bakery?
Tatsara Bakery, yeah. Dick asked me about it. I, originally told him it was a very good idea, would work very well, that he had to learn all of the Italian pastries that the Italian owner wanted to gleefully teach him. And I said, of course, it's not big enough. So he got them to take out a wall and rent the hairdressing salon that had been next door. I knew the hairdressing salon because in my early days of working on Bank of America, I singled out that hairdresser as a fraudulent operation. I used to launder money through Bank of America. But so there was no trouble getting that wall taken out and building a nice coffee shop there and learning to sell the pastries that the neighborhood liked. But this MBA character became a manager, and he said, we have to sell this bread big time, distribute it through one of the major distributors in the Bay Area. Bread is a really hot thing. And I said, well, once again, Zen Center does not have the technical managerial skills to handle something like that. Like, another factory manufacturing bread. You don't have the technical skills. You're lucky you can do a restaurant because you learn from Tatsara. You can do a bakery because you've learned from Tatsara, but you don't know anything about running a bread distribution business. And it failed miserably.
I remember.
In months later.
I remember.
But,
and Tatsara Bakery was great. Tatsara Bakery went on for a long time, like I don't know how long. Actually, Dick asked me to be the first manager of Tatsara Bakery, and I refused because, it had not been that long since I'd quit the grocery store, and I wanted to be on my own. But so that was about 76 or something. They started thinking about opening it, and it was open into the 90s. Right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, Elin was working there when we first got together, well, actually, she was living at Green Gulch, but then later she worked there, and when I went to Japan, it was still going. Yeah, but. Everything was going perfect. It was all fine. And tell me, what do you think about this? What I've noticed.
Well, there was also a big cash theft.
Oh yeah, Alan Marlowe stole like $17,000 when he was running the cash, and he admitted it.
Dick said we can't do anything about it. I said, are you kidding? You could have set a pretty bad example.
Oh,
if you don't punish people and he said, no, we don't punish people. This is Zen.
Yeah, well, he loved Alan. And not just that, but Jay Simoneau was running the bakery while that was happening. And he said he had to get Alan off of the cash register. He was taking money and Dick wouldn't let him.
Oh God. Yeah, I remember that. So we know all of that happened before Dick was dethroned.
Yeah. And Alan was working in the bakery, which Zen Center slave labor wages, which is great. I loved it. We were all having a great time. But he bought a Cadillac convertible and had like 16 speakers in his apartment and was taking people out. And it was so obvious. And then when he was confronted with it, he didn't deny it. He said, I brought Zen Center more donations from drug dealers that cover that many times over. And actually, LSD money. He brought in a lot of LSD money to Zen Center.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know any of that. I didn't. And the big deal to franchise the bread came well after that. I know it came after Dick left.
Oh yeah.
Because if Dick was there, I could have stopped it. But Dick was gone. There's no way I could stop it.
Well, what I would have people come into Green's restaurant and say, look, I'm a financier, blah blah blah. I want you to do another one. I said, never. This is it. This is all we can handle. And I'd say, look, I've seen people doing really good until they tried to do a second one or expand beyond where they were. And this is good for us. Have you noticed that when people try to make a chain or when they try
always.
Yeah.
Well, one of my best piece of advice, for which history probably won't recognize me, there was a little enchilada shop on Mission near 25th, closer to 25th. It was by far the best. And they joined the Briar Patch, so I loved the guy who ran it. And he asked me for advice. The first advice he asked me for was, he says, oh, there's somebody copying me right next door. What should I do? I said, be grateful. He said, what do you mean be grateful? I said, because they will take your overflow and people will see that it's not as good as yours. And he said, oh, okay. And it was exactly what happened. They lasted a year. And people learned that this La Taqueria was by far the best. And nobody knew why La Taqueria was so good. I did. I knew exactly why. It was the only fucking Oh, excuse me. This is going to be recorded. It was the only clean Mexican restaurant in America, not to mention Mexico. It was the only clean Mexican restaurant in America. It was immaculately clean. This guy kept it immaculate. He did it. He was so beautiful. He cleaned everything all the time. He didn't know that was his secret. And anyway, he came to me next. He said, I'm getting requests, Michael, from Uridelli Square, down the waterfront, all over the place. They want me to open El Taquerias or La Taquerias everywhere. They'll give me free rent for the first year or two. I said, let's see. You're going to have your family working here. This is a family operation. And you don't have any managerial experience, but you've done it. You're doing very well here. And 25 years from now or more, if you just stay here, you'll have a solid business, plenty of money, and you'll have your entire family will slowly take it over, and they will be able to run it. And all your children and your grandchildren will be able to succeed in business, and they'll understand it, and they'll learn business. Don't open anywhere else. And about 2 years ago, the New York Times ran a story on the best Mexican food in America, and he was on the front page.
Oh, wow.
He never opened anything else, but he became known as the best Mexican restaurant in America. And, I've never been able to come back. The lines were so long. From 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning until 9 or 10 at night.
Wow.
There was a line, at least 20, 30 people outside and 20 people inside.
Wow.
Never got shorter, and people were patient for that. He still is known as the best Mexican restaurant in America.
Wow.
And nobody knows the secret. Nobody knows the secret. He doesn't even know the secret to this day.
Oh, that's great. Hey, one piece of advice you gave, I think it was the first piece of advice in the 7 Laws of Money, was never invest in anything that promises over 10%. And I've that made perfect sense to me. Actually, I've never invested. I've only invested in myself. And in my crazy projects, right? And but then when Bernie Madoff came around, and everybody was falling for that thing, his pyramid scheme, including some people we know, and I thought of that advice in the 7 Laws of Money, Yeah.
Well, I had a client once, a very snooty Pacific Heights lady, very snooty. And she came to me and she says, I have this investment, this guy in San Jose, and every quarter he pays me 20% return on my investment. And so I've gotten all my friends into it, but I didn't get the last quarterly payment at all. And it should have come in, and I'm beginning to wonder now, what should I do? And I said, you are part of a Ponzi scheme. She said, no. He's a very reputable guy. He's handsome. He runs a nice office, dresses well. And I said, yeah, you're in a Ponzi scheme. The only thing you can do is hire a private detective. And I said, I'll give you the name of one who will find out what assets this man has, if any. He's probably got 2 or 3 houses somewhere scattered around the country. And you can get a lien on those houses, but you've got to be the first one before everybody else knows what it is, a Ponzi scheme. And you'll be able to at least get some of your money back by having a lien on any one of his houses somewhere. And she said, oh, thank you for your advice, Mr. Phillips, but I think I have an alternative route. I said, what is that? She says, well, I'm going to have my lawyers at Pillsbury, Madison, and Sutro sent him a very strong letter. And I just looked at her and just thought, oh, well, that's what you're going to do, my dear. You've lost all your money and so have all your friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, two people that you and I know from the circles we've talked about invested, and one of them is a well-known financial guru, invested in an obvious Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme that all these people in Hollywood were getting into, and one of them got out early, and his wife got, he gave his wife like $75,000, and he kept $75,000, and it was his ex-wife by then. And then the others lost everything, including the well-known financial advisor. And the person we know who got out early was sued for disgorgement by the others. And he had to share. He had to share. But the wife, smartly, had spent it all.
Now, is this guy, by the way, married to a California senator?
No.
Oh, okay. It's not Dickie.
No, I don't know about that.
Well, Dickie was an advisor to Zen Center.
Yeah, he was.
He was a friend of Dick Baker's.
Right. Right.
And he's made an enormous money off of being the husband of a U.S. senator.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything else about Zen Center you should know?
Yeah, think about that.
From a personal point of view, I have probably been sitting Zazen 40 or 50 years now. Mm. But at Baker and everybody else has always told me, oh, don't do it by yourself. And remember,
bullshit.
Sorry, I've been doing it by myself for 40 or 50 years.
Me too.
And, yeah. Anyhow. And I didn't have much connection with Zen Center other than through Greens, which is where from about late 90s. But there were always Zen Center people there, but mostly didn't have much to do with Zen Center.
Well, you were on the Everyday board,
very active up until the early 90s.
And I remember you told me you were going to quit it. You were going to quit something because you wanted Zen Center to get rid of Green Gulch or let it branch off because it was too much of a financial burden on Zen Center.
Oh, yeah. Financially, Green Gulch never made any sense. It was just sentimental attachment that everybody had to it. It never made financial sense at all. But I didn't care. It was, I had my interest without Dick there, my interests were gone. He was the appeal. And some of the institutions were still feeling well after Dick was gone, but not that much. And my early hope from Zen Center, because of Dick, I really thought, hey, this is a good way to, we're going to get a lot of good minds out of this. It's going to be a lot of interesting people that are going to come out of this practice. And as time went on, by the mid-'80s, it was obvious it's not true at all. They were all just going to be, there were always a few people who were interesting. And some of them were great, like Rabbi
Alan Liu.
Alan Liu. Alan Liu is one of the really great people in the history of San Francisco. Very important person. Built a gigantic congregation for himself as a conservative rabbi. And he did a marvelous job of creating
he was a Tatsara student.
And he was original. Yeah, he was a very original thinker, and I always enjoyed him. But at some point, that was it. He
Yeah,
was
I
the
was
last
sorry he
original
died.
thinker.
Uh,
Uh,
Too young. Too
yeah,
young.
he did.
Yeah.
So was I. Oh, yeah. He was a wonderful guy. Anyhow, once I sort of realized that, the bulletin boards at Zen Center were really just every wishy-washy, lefty, it's absurd, love the homeless stuff. Then I just said, there's nothing's going to come out of here anymore. But David, glad you called, and for God's sake, edit this down to 20 minutes, and somebody might listen.
We were unrestrained, and it'll be a lot of work.
I know. Oh, David, remember, for 9 years, I produced a national public radio program, half hour every week for 9 years. That's 300 programs. But first of all, I cut them off at 30 minutes. But we still had a lot of editing to do. Everything had to be edited. And I can imagine what it's going to mean to you. I would have, edited it down to 30 minutes. People don't have much patience beyond that.
Yeah, well, a lot of what I do, though, is like archiving, and it's just keeping an oral history. So I've got some very long ones. I just put up a very long one with Paul Disco, and we're going to do another one. But yeah, that it's better.
Wow.
I've Mel Weitzman's in hospice, and I've done 3 with him this year, and he's been
good. I love Mel.
He's been great.
I'm glad you got a lot of material on him.
Oh, he's been great. Yeah.
He is great.
Yeah.
He was probably great before he found Zen, and Zen was just perfect for him.
Oh, you'd love his story, man. The guy has just never had a normal job. He was just an artist, and he played music, and then he got involved with Zen Center, and right away he was running the Berkeley Zendo. I mean, it was...
Of course. He's just the perfect person for that.
Yeah, it's just really nice, mellow guys, not all full of himself. There's a price people pay becoming teachers. It's dangerous territory. Okay, Michael.
All right, David, thank you for calling, and thank you for letting me know what's going on.
Yeah, that was really fun. That was great.
Take care, David. My love to Katrinka.
Yeah. And my love to Sony. My love to Sony.
She's right here. Yeah. Attached to her telephone.
Okay.
All right, David.
Take care.
Bye, David.
Bye. So thanks a lot, Michael. Michael and I talked for 3 hours, incidentally. And we talked for 30 minutes the day before. So that was great. It had been a while. I got it cut down to 2 hours and 20 minutes or something. My apologies. Anyway, really enjoyed talking with Michael, and I look forward to the next time we meet. So, listen, before we sign off, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, which is you, our dear listener. Listen, if you're so moved, I encourage you to go to the homepage of cuke.com, cuke.com, hit the donate link, which goes to the donate page, and it'll show you how to send a check, or make a PayPal donation, or become a PayPal subscriber for as little as $1 a month. It's a refreshing experience, and I think you'll find it a lot of fun, and it's extremely easy to do. So thanks a lot for joining us, and until next time, this is DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.